Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to unpack a really catastrophic industrial event, one that honestly captured global headlines and brought the sheer massive scale of our world's energy infrastructure into a very sharp and tragically, a very human focus. We are looking directly at the June 2026 explosion at the Barzan gas plant over in Qatar. So let's just dive right into this. We're going to break down the timeline, look at the actual technical realities of the facility, and ultimately talk about the profound human cost of this disaster. Okay, to truly wrap our heads around the scale of this event, we have to look at the immediate physical impact first. On the late evening of Sunday, June 21st, 2026, a blast ripped through the facility. And the shockwave from this, it was so incredibly powerful that it actually traveled 70 kilometers away from the epicenter. It rattled windows and caused immediate panic all the way over in central Doha. I mean, picture this for a second. Imagine sitting in your living room a full hour's drive away from an industrial site and physically feeling the force of an accident. That is the kind of immense, earth-shaking energy we're talking about here. And the visual evidence was just as staggering. An AFP reporter who was situated a full 20 kilometers away from the plant reported seeing these massive plumes of fire and thick smoke just aggressively rising into the night sky. So, this wasn't some minor localized fire. This was a visceral, highly visible disaster that literally illuminated the desert sky. And naturally, it immediately raised some urgent questions, both locally and internationally, like what exactly is burning out there and is the global energy supply suddenly at risk? All right, Section 1, Inside the Barzan plant. To understand the impact of the blast, we first need to pinpoint exactly where it happened. The explosion took place inside Ras Laffan industrial city. Located about 80 kilometers north of Doha, Ras Laffan is, well, it isn't just your regular industrial park. It is a sprawling, vital organ of the global economy. It's literally the world's largest liquefied natural gas, or LNG, export center. To put that into perspective for a second, roughly 1/5 of the entire world's LNG supply flows out of this single hub. But, and this is a really critical distinction to make, the explosion did not happen at the export terminals. Yeah, you have to notice the stark difference in purpose here. On one side, you have the Ras Laffan export hub, serving the global market. And on the other, you have the Barzan gas facility. The Barzan facility, which is primarily owned by Qatar Energy, with a smaller share held by ExxonMobil, serves a distinctly different yet equally vital purpose. Barzan doesn't actually produce LNG for international shipping. Instead, it's almost entirely dedicated to domestic supply. So the crucial point here is the capacity of this specific plant. The Barzan facility was designed to produce an astonishing 1.4 billion standard cubic feet of sales gas a single day. And why does that matter to us? Because that gas is the absolute lifeblood of Qatar's local infrastructure. It's used primarily for local electricity generation and, incredibly importantly for a nation located on the Arabian Peninsula, it powers their massive water desalination plants. It literally keeps the lights on and the clean water flowing in the desert. Moving on to Section 2, the restart sequence. So how exactly did a plant that is so crucial to daily survival end up in flames? Well, this timeline gives us the full operational context. You see, the Barzan plant wasn't just running normally when it exploded. Back in December of 2025, production was intentionally completely shut down for urgent maintenance. Then, in March 2026, the broader Ras Laffan complex sustained damage due to the regional conflict and those Iranian strikes, which forced even further delays across the whole hub. So the plant essentially sat dormant for months. Finally, on Friday, June 19, 2026, the highly complex, super-sensitive process of restarting operations began, and then just 2 days later, on June 21st, the explosion occurred. Which brings us to Section 3, the technical malfunction. Now, given the geopolitical backdrop we just mentioned and the March 2026 missile strikes in the region, rumors obviously began to swirl almost immediately. Was this another attack? Well, this brings us to a really definitive statement from Qatar's Energy Minister, Saad Sharida Al-Kabi. He addressed the public and the markets directly, stating, quote, "This was an accident and not sabotage or hostile in nature," end quote. He made it exceptionally clear that, despite all the very real geopolitical tensions and the previous strikes on the broader complex earlier in the year, this specific explosion at Barzan was purely an operational malfunction. Restarting a dormant gas facility requires carefully balancing immense pressures, and tragically, a technical failure just happened during this highly delicate process. And looking at the official assessments from Qatar Energy and the Interior Ministry, we can see the immediate aftermath structured right here. First, as we noted, it was a technical accident during the restart. Second, Qatar's civil defense and emergency response teams deployed immediately, and they actually contained the fire very swiftly. Third, they confirmed there was no loss of containment, meaning there were no hazardous leaks threatening public safety or the surrounding environment. And finally, because Barzan serves the domestic market and is physically separate from those export trains, global LNG shipments and port operations were entirely unaffected by the blast. Now, Section 4, honoring the lost workers. While the global energy markets might have breathed a huge sigh of relief that exports were untouched, we really need to slow down here for a second. We must shift our focus from the massive industrial scale of this event to the profound, totally irreplaceable human tragedy at its center. Because despite the remarkably swift response from emergency services, the blast was simply too powerful. 13 workers tragically lost their lives while executing those highly complex restart operations on that Sunday night. The human toll here is just devastating. These were foreign nationals working far from their own homes to maintain the infrastructure that powers an entire nation. The Indian embassy in Doha confirmed that 12 Indian nationals were killed in the blast, alongside one Pakistani national. Diplomatic efforts were mobilized immediately by the respective embassies, and they worked closely with Qatari authorities to ensure the rapid repatriation of the workers' remains to their grieving families. And the human impact extended even further, really highlighting the deeply globalized nature of the modern energy workforce. 66 workers were injured in the explosion. Now, thankfully, officials did confirm that none of their injuries were life-threatening. But just look at the sheer diversity of the nationalities impacted here. Alongside Qataris, the injured included workers from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. It also heavily impacted African nationals, with workers from Kenya, Ghana, Tanzania, Nigeria, and Guinea all receiving medical treatment. Qatar Energy has pledged its full support and medical care for all those affected by the tragedy. Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. We started this off by looking at a massive 70-kilometer shockwave, right? A facility that pumps out 1.4 billion cubic feet of gas a day. But it is absolutely vital to remember what it actually takes to safely harness that kind of power. When we flip on our lights at home, or when we drink clean water that was desalinated from the sea, do we stop to remember the human hands, the incredibly diverse global workforce that take on these hidden risks just to sustain our modern lives? It's a pretty sobering reflection on the true cost of the energy we rely on every single day. Thank you so much for joining me to understand the full picture of the Barzan gas plant explosion. Keep asking questions and keep seeking to understand the systems that power our world. Catch you next time.